Are you ready to untangle from your past, recover from heartbreak, and revive your life? This is Soul CPR with your host, Ann Papayoti. We've all had soul-crushing experiences and lost ourselves in our pain, but there is a way out. On this podcast, Amazon best-selling author, award-winning life coach, and advice columnist Ann Papayoti helps us navigate the path from heartbreak to healing. So now, please welcome the host of Soul CPR, Ann Papayoti.
Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm glad you're here. If you happen to be following me on social media, you may have seen a recent post about melanoma. On episode 4 of this show, dealing with a diagnosis, my guest Monica Housewright bravely and openly shared her diagnosis and treatments for melanoma, an aggressive and potentially fatal form of skin cancer. Her message to us all was to have regular dermatological visits and skin checks, and that motivated me to ensure that I did just that. And from that recent appointment, I ended up with 3 areas that concerned my dermatologist, resulting in biopsies. And a week later, 2 of 3 came back cancerous, 1 basal cell carcinoma and 1 melanoma. I've since had surgery to remove the melanoma and have been waiting on the pathology results to learn if I have clear margins, meaning that the surgeon was able to remove deep and wide enough to clear the area on my chest of cancer. Now, it was stage 0 or in situ, meaning the cancer was contained to the skin surface and the epidermis, only breaching the outermost layer of the skin. And I will have the stitches removed this week on Thursday, and at the same appointment, I'll have the basal cell area on my arm surgically excised. And I'm happy to be able to report today that I received a call just late yesterday afternoon that I do indeed have clear margins for the melanoma. What a relief. And there will be no more surgery or treatment required, but I will need to be seen every 3 months for the next 2 years. And I appreciate all the outpouring of love and support that I've received on my social media posts about this. I've really been overwhelmed with gratitude. So thank you. Now, listeners, what was a small mole and had been there for years and previously checked had changed and required a 2.5-inch incision to ensure margins clear of cancer. So do not think it has to be a new growth for it to be a problem. Now, I share this so that you too will take this seriously and not ignore the recommendations, risk factors, and warning signs. So please visit skincancer.org for information and see your dermatologist. I've also found since my diagnosis, curemelanoma.org as a wonderful resource of information. They have a lot of pictures and charts and things to help you as you assess your own skin, as you look for things that may be of concern. So my message on this is do not procrastinate, okay? It is one of the top 3 cancers diagnosed even in our young people for ages 25 to 39, top 3 cancers. So Dan and Chris, get y'all's appointments made, okay? Now, on a lighter note, my young doctor seems to enjoy classic rock music as his office is adorned with posters from all the great bands of the 70s. And y'all know I talk about music a lot on this show. Now, when I said he seemed to be young, too young to be such a fan, he said that he grew up on classic rock. And I replied, well, so did I, but it wasn't classic then. It was just rock. We both shared a laugh. And as he did the surgery, he did have music playing. Only it wasn't that relaxing spa music as you might think. The 2 songs I recall hearing were Bachman Turner Overdrive's Taking Care of Business, and that was during the excision, and then Hart's Barracuda as he stitched me up. Now, whatever he needed to focus, right? I just focused on my breath, closed my eyes, and revisited my youth, wishing I had worn sunscreen and stayed out of the trendy tanning bed salons. All right, moving on to today's topic, which is about procrastination and perfectionism, the twins. So if you hear a little background noise, Odie decided to bring one of these big, I don't know, I don't know what they're made of, rawhide bones in here today, and he is going to town on it. So I apologize for that. So the twins, I bet you've got a thing for the twins, don't you? You like to run in circles with prim and proper perfectionism and hang out behind closed doors with its evil twin procrastination? If so, I know your type. You can look all put together and cool on the outside, but it's tearing you up on the inside. Let's face it, these relationships are taking a toll on you. Your work is suffering from the lies. You're missing opportunities because one of the twins distracts you. The lure is cheating you from what could be. Look, it's time to break up. And I'd like to introduce you to the one that just may change your life. Meet Endeavor. With this one on your side, always giving your best effort, you just may find the motivation to approach challenges with confidence, the freedom to show up uninhibited, and the willingness to be both timely and decisive, the openness to take risks and to fall forward. I expect you will soon recognize the many benefits of being in this healthy, supportive relationship in your personal and professional life. And when you fall helplessly in love with Endeavor and stop obsessing over the twins, you will find you're living true to your integrity and intuitively knowing when good is good enough and when now is the time. You will no longer be vulnerable to being seduced by perfectionism or procrastination into thinking, feeling, and doing otherwise. Those twins are poison, and their mother is anxiety, and they keep the family line going strong. Now, last week we had a conversation about fears, and we focused on the fear of failure. And while most of us experience it, at least situationally, for some it can become chronic, debilitating, and ultimately a true phobia. And the twins popped up in our conversation, didn't they? And they often pop up in my private coaching sessions. So Chris and I thought it would be a good idea to explore them further this week. Now, I make fun of them being twins. And I'd written that little opening monologue as a blog years ago. And it hit home for many readers because it is undeniable that perfectionism and procrastination are closely related to one another and to the fear of failure, though they can each have their own identity independent of one another as well. Now, the first thing I want you to do is think of the twins as behaviors. Perfectionism is the act of setting high standards or expectations of flawlessness, while procrastination is the act of delaying or avoiding. They are what you do, not who you are. So, what I do not want you to do is to label yourself a perfectionist or procrastinator. Do you get the difference? And why is it important to not label yourself? Because by doing so, you are judging yourself, criticizing yourself, perhaps boxing yourself in and giving yourself an excuse to continue a pattern of behavior that is not serving you well. And we can change how we behave, right? We have control over how we behave. And if you can agree with that, then hold on to that. And I'll keep going because it's time to talk about the mother. Do you remember who she is? Anxiety. And she is some real mama trauma, let me tell you. Well, she resides in your minds as a thought at first. And that could be fear of failure, fear of imperfection, fear of not being good enough, fear of rejection, fear of inability, fear of not being well liked, fear of being, it could be anything, fear of being too tall, too short, too fat, too thin, too dark, too light, too much, too little, too loud, too soft. But then she cloaks our bodies at the cellular level, wreaking havoc kind of from the inside out, causing pain, discomfort, disease. And then what we do or how we behave is limited, diminished, exhausted. And therefore, our results in life are not what we would have hoped for, dreamed of, or aspired to achieve. And if that behavior that we said earlier we can control was different, what would be different in your life? What if you did something different rather than continue to birth more of anxiety's little mini-me's? What if you said something like this? What if you said, "Hey, Mama A, I acknowledge you and recognize the patterns that are in my life because of your influence. And I choose to control what I can, which are at this time my habitual behaviors that only keep me producing more and more little anxieties. I choose to break this family line. No more twins. I choose endeavor. I will give my best effort every time on time and accept that as good enough, that I am good enough. I will choose to learn and grow. And as I do this, I know you'll hang around and make my stomach hurt or my heart race. I may have to run to the restroom at an inopportune moment, but I will not continue to birth twins, and I will notice that I survived. And with each experience and fewer offspring, I will also notice that it gets easier and easier as I get further and further from the nest of anxiety altogether. I'll even thank you one day. I'm sure you used to protect me from something as a child, from embarrassment or humiliation or bullying, but now I don't need you. I'm all grown up and I've got this. Even if they don't like my idea at work, or if my book proposal is rejected, or he or she says no, my perceived failure isn't fatal. I'll be disappointed in the reaction, but not in myself. I'll be proud because I endeavored, and I want to feel more of that. I want to feel more pride because that feels like freedom and ease and regulated breathing with a sense of calm in my chest and my gut. If that sounds good to you and you struggle with the twins, then I have a few strategies for you to consider. Now, one is to resolve the identity crisis that is happening in your head between who you believe you should be and who you actually are, and allowing your worth to come from being authentically you. And this goes back to those belief systems that are programmed in our minds that we talk about so often on this show. So, what belief may need to shift for you to be able to be true to you and know that you are enough as you are? Do you believe that you must be perfect to be lovable or to be valuable? I hear this often. And the next thing is you must also explore your definition of perfection altogether, and where did that expectation of perfection as you believe it to be come from? Is it from a culture, a parent, a teacher, a coach, an influencer? Is it from trying to keep up with a sibling to win a parent's love and approval? How may it have been self-imposed in some way because someone said so, or because of your own interpretation? Now, I often find myself in session with clients reminding them of their successes, asking them to tell me about a time when they overcame a setback and what was it about them that got them through it. Have you acknowledged your own strengths, your own achievements? Because these memories and self-assessments are often deeply stored or forgotten or harshly judged in some way. That inner critic that we all have can be brutal, and the inner cheerleader can be non-existent. And this becomes the focus to conquer and convert often in my work with people. So when I get to the point where I'm asking, what has someone else said, or what would they say about your work or your talents? People often do have some some raves or some rewards and honors that they've not even considered as triumphs or positive endorsements. They're stuck in negative self-judgment. So listeners, what is the benefit? Ask yourself, what is the benefit in criticizing yourself when others may admire you for the same thing that you put yourself down about? Now, you can learn to use positive or constructive feedback from others as anchors when you start to drift into self-doubt. And we'll talk more about anchor thoughts later in the show. But with each change of behavior, with each anchor to a positive thought about yourself, you change your brain. You break old catabolic patterns and reprogram new anabolic ones. You heal your life. You change your life. And if the twins are controlling you, I bet this sounds inviting. It's time for us to take our first break in the show, so don't go far. And when we come back, we'll have more Soul CPR. See you soon.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Soul CPR right here on Bold Brave TV. I'm Ann Papayotti, and today we are talking about perfectionism and procrastination, evil twins born from anxiety. Now, do those who practice perfectionism always also practice procrastination? No, but of course, striving to do everything flawlessly can lead to putting things off, and that puts you in the frustrating twin loop. So to be clear, it's not a bad thing to set high expectations and to go for them, but it's how you feel about yourself when you fall short that can be the problem. It's not allowing yourself a bad day or a critiqued performance or a lower graded assignment without it hurting so desperately that you now fear the pain of failure so greatly that you procrastinate to avoid the potential of pain. Yet that in and of itself sets you up for more worry, stress, and anxious feelings as deadlines approach and it's time to perform. Thus, the insidious cycle of perfectionism procrastination. Does that make sense? So, I've mentioned before that I was the kind of girl who tended to have to go for my goals twice. The first time I would be an almost, right? I would have been disappointed in the performance, not in myself, not in who I was as a person. I would not label myself in a negative way as I heard others do. I would learn a lot about what was expected, assess what I needed to do to improve in my skill set, and usually go back and try again, usually succeeding or at least going further than before I fell forward. It was only after emotional traumas that I pulled back effort toward goals because I didn't feel anything I did would be good enough. The underlying fear was that I was a failure, and therefore anything I did was a failure as well. And when you believe that about yourself, you make it true. For me, this happened while at university. I went from making excellent grades, being active on campus in leadership roles, winning university awards, being honored by my peers, to not showing up for class, missing exams, and withdrawing socially. I would drop classes to prevent the F on the report card, fall behind in hours, and feel more like a failure for not being on track with my studies. I understand now what I did not understand then, that my perfection-driven fear of failure led to delaying or avoiding as a coping mechanism for the distress of potentially not meeting my standards, those of the school, and those of my parents. And this caused a paralyzing anxiety, which in turn created a cycle where basic tasks were postponed indefinitely to avoid failing, yet contributed to underperforming and therefore failing. Now, this led to behaviors like overeating, overdrinking to numb myself, and then my physical appearance matched my disdain for myself. And this lasted about a year before I picked myself up, dusted myself off, and said, something has to change. Do you hear that? Change begins with awareness, and then it's a decision. I started with what I could control, and it certainly was not my thoughts about myself. That took time, a lot of time and dedication. I started with my environment, my triggers, and then my actions. So I changed schools away from the people who betrayed me, got a job, which gave me structure, which helped change my eating and drinking habits naturally. Started exercising, aerobics at the gym every night. It was the 80s. On the way home from work, I connected with old friends and made new friends. I was taking care of my body, so the weight came off. I was doing well at work, in school, and I was having some fun. And little by little, I began to like myself again. I still had work to do in my thought life, as I still saw myself as having failed at my previous school, which carried guilt and shame and thoughts of inadequacy. Now, that work would take years and other losses to put into perspective, but I was back on track and moving forward. What broke my stride was not completing my healing journey before someone came along and completed me with their words. And I take responsibility for being needy and allowing someone to finish fixing me rather than finish the job myself. And that became my first marriage, which turned out to be deceitful and abusive, as it was a cycle of idolation, devaluation, discard, and hoovering that many listeners can relate to, having been in relationship with a narcissist. Now, this experience kept underlining my underlying fear of not being good enough, as well as my fear of failure, this time with marriage, not meeting the expectations of my church, my family, etc. And when I did the real work of self-discovery, I unearthed the grandmother of my fears. My deepest underlying fear was and has always been the fear of disappointing others. And that fear may have always been something more of a motivator and in balance with my life until I labeled myself and believed I was a disappointment. Again, if you struggle with the twins, you're going to have to find that underlying fear, the grandmother, if you will, that has birthed the anxiety and the other fears that has led to the behaviors that are now not serving you. Most of us need to work on this in session with a therapist or a coach. Again, awareness, and then the actions of change. Now, once I broke free from the narcissistic relationship and understood who I was before trauma and who I still am, I realized I am someone who values and strives for excellence. I endeavor, if you will, to reach my goals, whatever those are. It's important to me to do my best, that's all. It doesn't mean that I criticize myself if I don't reach a goal. It just means it's important to me to do my best in whatever I choose to do. I'm simply not a half-asser. So when I let perfectionism or procrastination breed fear and anxiety and create apathy or lethargy, whether it was in academics, self-care, or marriage, I was going against myself. And that, my friends, is self-sabotage. And that leaves one drowning in self-disappointment. So what about you? Do you know who you are? And when you're living against yourself, how have the twins shown up in your life? And what little anxiety monsters have they bred and nurtured? I'm sure some of you may be thinking maybe procrastination has nothing to do with perfectionism at all. And it can seem more like just plain old fashioned laziness. So, what is the difference between procrastination and laziness? There is a distinct difference. To be brief, laziness is an unwillingness to exert an effort, and procrastination is more of an inability to exert an effort. So, you heard me call it a paralyzing anxiety. That's an inability, is it not? The fear of failure is real. And if you haven't listened to episode 16, please do so for more on that topic. That inability to do something in the present time comes from avoiding what you have determined will create negative emotions. For me, this always comes up when it's time to do my taxes. So, am I being lazy or am I procrastinating? Well, an article I read published by Very Well Mind shared research that indicated that people who have negative attitudes in general also delay tasks to a greater extent. And I definitely have a negative attitude about doing taxes. The article also said that people often gauge situations or make decisions with what is called a balance weighting bias, which is the tendency to assign different levels of importance or weight to positive and negative information. And that makes sense, right? So, for example, if you have a balance weighting bias toward the positive, you might focus on the reward, like of checking off taxes on your to-do list, because you're going to get a refund. You want to get it done. But if you think taxes are tedious and time consuming and complicated, so you have a bias towards the negative, you might put the task off longer. So the article says that procrastination is the result of people prioritizing not wanting to feel that aversive sensation. And there you have it, listeners. And this article confirms that if you procrastinate, it doesn't mean you're lazy. You just might have more negative associations with the task in front of you and want to avoid feeling that aversive sensation. But then this can become habitual. So, fellow tax postponers and those who recognize that you have habitual procrastination behaviors in your life, how do we change this? How do we break any habit? Well, we replace it with a new habit. And that sometimes means we have to start small. Experts say mindfulness practice, cognitive behavioral therapy is proven very helpful. But those breaking tasks down into manageable steps is usually a very easy first step we can all take to help shift our mind steps and tackle that tax overwhelm and defeat that seasonal anxiety for us all. But what about procrastinators who find it all more encompassing? It's not just this one thing or this one habit in one area of life. Well, there's going to be thought patterns that come up that have to be challenged. And we're going to talk more about exactly what to do in the next segment when I bring Chris on. But are there other causes of procrastination than perfectionism? Absolutely. The anxieties that come with fear of failure in general and depression. So although perfectionism can lead to procrastination, not all procrastinators are perfectionists. And as we said, not all procrastinators are lazy. There is a difference. And other causes of there's these different anxieties that can show up in different ways, and they can co-occur with other things. So sometimes OCD, ADHD, there are different co-occurring stressors in people's lives that can show up. And so it's important that you get a proper diagnosis if procrastination show up in your life and it's defeating you in areas of your life. You want to understand the root cause and source of this. Now, is perfectionism, when we go back to that, always a bad thing? Of course not, because it can lead to, it can be a motivator to get things in on time. It can be, as long as it's in balance, as we said, as long as it doesn't become so restrictive, as long as you don't make it about you, right? But when it's perfectionistic procrastination, when it leads to that, that's when we find this all or nothing thinking that can become a problem. And I do know that I share this a lot with a lot of writer friends. I have a half-written novel in a shoebox somewhere. So it's a key sign of perfectionism-induced procrastination is setting a standard so high that it feels impossible to even start the task, right? Additional signs include, continuing to make revisions. And this is what writers often do, trying to get it perfect, say it perfectly, and that becomes that all or nothing thinking. And so for students, maybe don't complete the assignment. It's not quite right. It's not quite right. And then missing a deadline rather than allowing that good to be good enough. All right, it's time for our second break. And when we come back, I'm going to bring Chris on, my son, my intern, and we're going to talk about the how to break free from this trap of perfectionism and procrastination. And we're going to talk about all the ways that we can overcome this. We'll see you soon. Don't go far. We'll be back with more Soul CPR.
Dr. RC will share extraordinary resources and services that promote educational success, as well as making a difference in the lives of all social workers, as well as the lives of children, adolescents, and teens of today. She will have open discussions addressing many of the issues that we face about our youth and how being employed in the uniquely skilled profession of social work for over 18 years has taught invaluable lessons through her personal experiences. She will also provide real-life facts, examples, and personal stories that will confirm that why serving as a child advocate is extremely beneficial when addressing the needs of the whole child. Listen live to Dare to Soar, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network, and tune in radio as Dr. RC will provide thought-provoking information that will empower, encourage, and strengthen students, families, and communities across our nation. You can also visit her at soarwithkatie.com. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Soul CPR. I'm Ann Papiotti. I'm here with my intern, my son, Chris, who is a psychology major at University of North Texas. I introduced him on the previous show, and he's here with me today to talk about some of the research he did in finding ways for us to manage perfectionism and procrastination. So, Chris, share some of the tips that you found.
So I found 8 tips how to manage perfectionism and procrastination from choosingtherapy.com. The first one is setting realistic goals. Now, setting realistic goals is quite important because it helps us take away the stress from looking at the larger goal by breaking it down by step by step.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you're in school like I am, you have to manage your classes and manage your social life at the same time. So what I did was, in my personal, I would look at the classes that I have, what is due, whenever, and like on Monday I do English and history, and then on another day math, whatever. And then you can really apply that to really anything in your life.
Yeah, and I think the realistic goal approach is very important because it's what happens with unrealistic goal setting that I see for people, they get overwhelmed with something big. So, realistic goals can help you feel like you've accomplished something and you can break it down by category. I'm hearing you say that's worked for you.
Yeah.
And I know as a writer, something that we do to keep from being overwhelmed is just breaking it down into, say, like an outline or categories, and then just a little bit at a time. So those little actionable steps. And then I know for me, I like to check things off, right? So then I feel like I've accomplished something when I'm able to put a check mark beside it. And then I realize, okay, I'm moving towards the larger goal, but I'm focused, as you said, on the smaller goal. Yeah. What else?
The second tool that they give us is utilizing your time management. This can once again go into setting realistic goals in many ways. Like I said, setting a schedule and being self-disciplined with yourself.
Yeah. So prioritizing, figuring out what's a priority, right? Instead of everything feeling like a priority.
Right.
When everything feels like it has equal importance, it can lead people to burnout, right?
Yeah.
Then it's too much. So really figuring out what's priority. One tip that I use with my clients is to only have 3 things. What are your top 3? And then you can't bring something else up till one thing's marked off. So you never have more than 3 things to do or that are important for a day, if that's what we're looking at. And it seems to be something that they find very helpful. What else you got?
Practice self-compassion. And I understand this can be difficult for some.
Yeah.
But the thing is that you should keep in mind, if you wouldn't say it to another person, you shouldn't say it about yourself, right?
That's good. Yeah.
So it's just practicing self-love, right? Like, for example, if you're in a relationship, you're going to have trouble loving another if you can't even love yourself.
Amen. That's for sure. So, and I think this is huge because self-compassion, a lot of people ask me, I don't know what self-love is. Well, it can be simply forgiving yourself for missing a deadline, or for turning in something that's not perfect but meeting that deadline. Saying, okay, which was it that I need to forgive myself for? But using that's what self-compassion can look like and sound like, right?
Life's already hard. Don't beat yourself up already. So.
Yeah. What else you got?
Seek professional support.
Oh, okay.
So whether that be life coaching, a therapist, or even a psychiatrist, if you feel like you need the help, don't be afraid to go and ask for it. Because how are you going to help yourself if you don't even ask?
Absolutely. And there's so many options available now because of the online world, right? You don't have to have something available to you in person if you're willing to go online and work with somebody everywhere. And then for students, there's resources at school. For people in the workforce, usually there are resources through your company. So reach out and see what's available to you and go for it, because as Chris said, you got to be able to to help yourself, and asking for help is that first step. Next.
Number 5, challenge all or nothing thinking.
Yeah.
Now, perfectionism creates all or nothing thinking and can make you believe that you should only work on something if it cannot be perfect. So in shorter terms, it's just saying, just get started and worry about the perfection later. Like if you just picked up guitar or any kind of instrument or whatever you're doing in life, a hobby, work, whatever it may be, remember, you're not going to have it right away. It takes time. So just remember that. Set small goals for each week or each day, and then eventually over time, you will achieve that perfection that you want.
Yeah, and I think this is where I like to use the progress over perfection, right? And seeing that, watching, allowing the progress to be your what you're proud of. And I say this in fitness classes all the time so that people aren't frustrated because they can't, you know, do a certain pose or something in Pilates. And it's same thing. Chris has picked up guitar again recently, and there was moments of frustration, to be
Yeah, there
honest,
were.
because he couldn't play a song that he used to could play. And it was like giving himself that grace of the progress of he'd only been picked the guitar up for a week, and I'm like, where's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So coming back to that, challenging that all or nothing and going to progress over perfection is what I'm hearing you say, really.
Correct. Which brings us to our next tool, which is focus on the progress, not the outcome.
Oh, yeah.
So don't worry about the destination. Enjoy the journey of learning and experiencing whatever it may be, the good or the bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, when you were saying before about the perfection, remember when we were talking earlier in the show about what's your definition of perfection, and can you relax that a little bit so that you can enjoy the journey, right? And enjoy that process, and gain and recognize that we are human and mistakes are part of that, no matter what it is. And so I love that one too. What else you got?
7,
Yeah.
set boundaries.
Ooh.
And this just doesn't mean other people, like with a friend that keeps asking for too much money from you, right? It's setting boundaries with yourself. You know what I mean? So when you're setting boundaries with yourself, it's more like, okay, if I get to a negative place, just take a step back. You know what I mean? Like if you're, like I said, I keep using instruments as a way about, perfection and progress. But like if you're learning piano, like, and you can't get a song right away, take a breather, take a step back. Because once you get too close to something, you kind of don't realize what you're doing right or wrong. You're kind of just focusing too much on it, right? But once we take a step back from things and then we come back to it later, we come back with a fresher mind. Mm-hmm. And when we come with that fresher mind, we get more done.
Absolutely. That goes for anything. So if you're working on a project at work and you're hitting a wall, it's that take a brain break, I call it. Go walk around, do something. Moving your body is always a good thing to do. So shifting yourself physiologically will help start shifting your mindset, and then coming back to it like you said. Awesome. What else you got? One more?
The final one. Reward progress. Now, I know some people struggle with, oh, I don't deserve this, I don't deserve that. But let's say at work, you had a very good quarter. Go out and reward yourself if you had a successful quarter. Go out, have a drink with a friend, or go bowling, something, or reward yourself with saving some money on the side for that jet ski you want.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. So I think it's celebrating that progress over that unattainable, unrealistic, bigger goal, right? So that you are celebrating along the way, and you'll recognize that journey has been fulfilling as you move towards that bigger goal. And it helps the bigger goal not be so important as it has been moving towards it, right? So I love that. It's important to celebrate progress, and breaks that cycle of, it literally helps break the cycle of perfectionism and procrastination. Thank you for all that, Chris. Something else I'd like to add on is that if you recognize that it's become a habit, or a behavior with or without a stress trigger, then what we call a pattern interrupt is in order. And pattern interrupts originate from neurolinguistics programming, or NLP for short. And a pattern interrupt involves recognizing an unwanted pattern, disrupting it, and then leading someone to the desired behavior. And psychologists use pattern interrupts to break people out of unwanted, unconscious responses that they've developed throughout a lifetime. It's an unexpected act that shocks a person into a different state of mind, if you will. and the interruption becomes part of the new pattern. And the person eventually experiences the intervention as part of the process. And as a certified NLP practitioner, I've seen amazing results for people with pattern interrupts. So, listeners, if you're familiar with former lawyer turned motivational guru Mel Robbins, she's doing this with her 5-second rule. She says, once you recognize an unwanted behavior, in this case, procrastination, acknowledge it, then break the state by counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is the pattern interruption. Then do one thing toward the goal, one thing. And research, Robbins says, shows that 80% of us will keep going once we get started. So the goal really is to just get started, like Chris said before, just get started. And Robbins applies her 5-second rule or pattern interrupt to any time you're feeling anxious. Just break the state of the feeling when you recognize that you're anxious by doing the countdown. It's the same as using conscious breathing to shift from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous sympathetic, can't talk today, nervous system, to go from that fight, flight, or freeze response into what we call rest and digest. So after the countdown, just you replace the anxious thought with the anchor thought we mentioned earlier. The key is to know an anchor thought in advance. So she gives the example, the fear of flying. The anchor being the joy of arriving at the destination with a fond memory of a safe and happy place. So the countdown is your pattern interrupt of the anxious thought about your fear of flying. And then you consciously choose to anchor yourself to a safe, soothing thought to stay calm and without fear. So anxiety, fear, flying, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go into my happy thought. Okay, so that's the goal. Same thing with the breath. Hey, Chris, do you smell popcorn?
What?
What? So that, ladies and gentlemen, was an example of a pattern interrupt. The brain pivoted to something else, and Chris started focusing his sensory connectors to the present moment when I said, do you smell popcorn? And he's nowhere near a fear, not that he was in the moment. But are you doing the same? When I asked if you smell popcorn, it took you from wherever you were, whatever your thoughts were, to the present moment and trying to smell popcorn. Anyway, I love it. It's time for our last break. And when we come back, we'll be finished with our closing comments. And Odie is being a pain under the desk here, but trying to get our attention. Yep. We'll see you soon with more Soul CPR. Don't go far.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Mike Zorich, a 3-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a 6-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2 thirds, and 2 fourths. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorich, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorich has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Hi, and welcome back, everyone, to the closing section of today's episode. If you had not met Odie before, this is Odie, the one causing all the havoc in the background today. He's our rescued pit bull mix, and he is just not going to be unattended today, so it looks like. So, Chris, share what you got done this week that you had procrastinated for a long time.
My driver's license.
Was there fear involved?
No, it's just lazy.
Just
lazy. Just put it off for 6 months.
Okay, you just put it off for 6 months. So now, experts would say he had done one step. He had picked up the paperwork, and where was it?
In my car, in the center console.
Center console for 6 months. So the hard part is what? Just getting started. It's just getting started. So sometimes it could be because there's something new, something unknown, and the uncertainty of how difficult it may be. But sometimes it is just being lazy. So parents, lazy. When something resembles lazy, there could be a mental block. I'm just going to encourage you to approach your teen, your child, your college student with an observation of their behavior. For example, if you've seen they've not started a project and you know that it's due soon, then try to ask without judgment, how they're feeling about it. I've noticed that you haven't started, how are you feeling about it? And then ask, what are they thinking that's creating the way they're feeling about it? Are they stressed? Are they uncertain? What is it? All of this is in an effort to uncover the block that may exist. And so you can approach them in a helpful way rather than a hurtful way, because we often, as parents, tend to get angry and punitive rather than compassionate and encouraging, don't we? So, listeners, if you are in relationship with the twins, it's important to reflect and see if they show up in all areas of your life or only in some, and seek to understand how they may be connected for you, or if they're just independent tendencies, so that you can figure out what to work on and what are the best strategies for you to learn how to cope with them and overcome them in your life. And a therapist or coach can certainly help you address the source of your stress or anxiety and identify your underlying fear, which is very important, so that you'll stop holding yourself back and gain control of your life. So, Chris, what are today's takeaway?
So today's takeaway is procrastination and perfectionism are linked by anxiety, creating a vicious cycle where fear of failure and inadequacy causes procrastination. Leading to further anxiety and perfectionism, this cycle can lead to heightened levels of mental health issues like anxiety and depression. Practice facing discomfort, changing your beliefs, and cultivating self-compassion in order to free yourself from procrastination and perfectionism cycle.
Yeah, it's a cycle, and it is not a fun one. So free yourself. So thank you for being here with us today. Thank you to Dan, who's back at Bold Brave TV studios, keeping everything running smoothly behind the scenes. And thank you to Chris for doing the research and being here with me today. He'll be here all summer. So as we conclude this episode of Soul CPR, Healing Out Loud, remember that healing is not a linear journey. It's a process of profound transformation. If today's stories resonated with you, share the podcast with those who might need a lifeline of their own. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a review to help us reach more hearts. And you can connect with me on social media. You'll find me on Facebook at Skyview Coaching, and on all the other platforms at Ann Papayotti, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. So let me know your thoughts, your stories, and the topics you'd like to explore in future episodes. So until next time, may you find strength in your vulnerability and courage in your journey. Thank you for listening. Breathe deeply, love openly, and live soulfully.
This has been Soul CPR with host Ann Papayotti. Breathe life back into your spirit with each episode, where she and special guests explore the relationships that hurt us and discover that healing can only begin with you. Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.